Thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Good evening and welcome to you all to this Rochdale community hustings. Really great to see so many people come out this evening to hear from our candidates. My name is Usman Nawaz and I've got the privilege of hosting this evening's hustings. This event has been organised by a group of local community volunteers and activists who want to ensure that our communities have an opportunity to quiz the key candidates in this election. It's important to note that this event has not been organised by any particular organisation or any charity. This is essentially a group of friends who have come together, local community members who want to have the opportunity and provide an opportunity to others in Rochdale to be able to quiz the candidates in this type of format. Before we get into the opening statements from each of our invited candidates, there's a few important clarifications which I want to make for the benefit of everyone. Just on cue, the heating starts. Firstly, the organisers of the hustings decided to invite the candidates from the three main political parties, plus George Galloway from the Workers' Party. Now, this decision was based on a number of factors which included inviting candidates from parties which are more prominent, those parties which have local elected representatives on the council, and individuals which may be able to respond effectively to issues of concern at the moment being raised predominantly within the Asian and Muslim communities in Rochdale, hence why this event is has been organised within this community in the heart of the Pakistani and Bangladeshi community in Rochdale. Now, there are 11 candidates in this by-election, if we count also the official Monster Raving Loon Party, which of course we should. And clearly it was unviable for us to host all 11 within a 2-hour event. And I know there are a number of independent candidates and candidates from other parties who are disappointed not to be on the stage this evening. However, those candidates who are independent or from other parties and are sat in the audience will have an opportunity, should they wish to use it, at the end of the hustings to make a statement for the duration of 2 minutes and present their case before the closing statement from the candidates. So that opportunity will be provided.
This is anti-democratic.
Thank you. We've not yet got into the audience participation. There is no expectation on us to invite all of the candidates. Thank you. You've said your bit now. Thank you very much. So I want to make it absolutely clear, nobody, and there has been some chatter about this, has been barred or banned from the hustings. Everybody has had the opportunity to register to attend. There are candidates clearly that we can see in the audience who have registered to attend. There are candidates who haven't registered to attend, and there was one just outside the door, and he was given the opportunity to wait until we started, see what empty seats there are available, and then he could take a seat. He decided not to take up that offer. And just as you've had to register, I think it's fair that anybody who comes should register to take part. Now, the invited candidates who are here and can be seen on stage are those the invited candidates are the ones that are here that you can see on the stage, George Galloway and Iain Donaldson. And there are 2 candidates who have decided not to turn up, and they're represented by an empty chair. Before Azhar Ali was suspended by the Labour Party, he had agreed in principle to attend a hustings session. Since his suspension, I have been contacting him regularly to reconfirm his attendance, and only at 2:30 p.m. earlier today, he told me that he couldn't attend due to a family emergency. Paul Ellison of the Conservative Party had agreed to attend, as was confirmed by the North West Regional Press Officer for the party. However, just 2 days ago, without providing any reason, the Conservative candidate backed out of attending this hustings. The party told us that another representative would attend, and clearly they've not been able to find someone to take their place. But we do have the two candidates here, and we are grateful that they have taken the time to attend and engage with the community. Now, in terms of the format of the hustings, we will begin with each of the two candidates making a 3-minute uninterrupted opening statement. This will be timed, and a bell will sound when the time is up. Following the opening statements, we'll take questions related to local issues first, then national issues, then international issues. And I would ask that we respect the order in which the session has been put together. So if local issues will be first, then national, then international issues. Candidates will have an opportunity to respond to questions put to them. For some questions, they both may need to respond or want to respond, and for others, it may just be one of them. And they are welcome to debate each other's answers. Each topic area will be timed, and we'll roughly spend 20 to 30 minutes on each topic, and we'll see how that time progresses. And if we have time remaining at the end, we will have a quick fire round for any general questions not covered within those themes. Once the Q&A is over, candidates will make a closing statement for 2 minutes. And as I said earlier, independent candidates who are in the audience and want to have an opportunity to address the hall will also have an opportunity to do that.
That is not equal.
I'm sorry, if you continue to persist in shouting out, we have security and we will ask you to leave. Before, and that's a good cue actually for the ground rules for this session. We know that politics can be emotive and makes people passionate, which is commendable. And I expect we'll see some of that passion in the hall this evening from our candidates and also from the public. But I would ask that we engage in respectful, courteous and productive dialogue. Abuse to the candidates and or other members of the public will not be tolerated. We do have security personnel in the hall to keep us all safe, but I hope we don't have to call on their services to ask anyone to leave. When asking a question, I would ask that you do just that. We don't want speeches from the floor. Keep your questions succinct and make clear who it's aimed at. And also, please switch off your mobile phones or put them on silent. I know there are people who will want to take photos. Thanks, Iain. I know there are people who will want to take photos, make videos and live stream. There is a live stream currently ongoing on the Workers' Party YouTube page. And that's absolutely fine. But please try not to restrict the views of the people sat around you. We do also have in the room various media outlets. There's a recording taking place for Press Radio. We have 5 Pillars. Website also here. We have a photographer for National Press, Rochdale Online, and I believe the Times was due to attend. I'm not sure if they have. But the media is also in the room. So that sets out the format for this evening, and we hope to conclude by 9 o'clock or as close to 9 o'clock as possible. Just in terms of housekeeping for the hall that we're in, there are fire exits behind you and behind these dividers here. There are toilets just outside the door that you came into this hall. They are unisex toilets. The hall, as you will see in the centre, is under renovation at the moment, so we thank you for your cooperation. As I said, there are 11 candidates, and I'll read all their names at the end. But the two that we have on the stage, so we have Iain Donaldson from the Liberal Democrats. Iain is a retired administrator at the University of Manchester, and experienced in local government after being a councillor for 19 years. George Galloway has been a member of Parliament for a number of years, since 1987, if that is right. And was initially a member of Parliament for Glasgow Hillhead, and then Glasgow Kelvin later. He was also MP for Bethnal Green and Bow from 2005 to 10, and also for the Bradford West constituency. And I'm grateful to both of our candidates. I did draw lots earlier myself, so it was completely fair. So Iain will have your opening statement first, and you will have your closing statement second when we get that. Thank you. You've got your 3 minutes.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. We live in very difficult times, both in terms of the international scene the national scene and here in Rochdale. I moved to Rochdale a few years back to look after my ailing mother, and I've stayed here. And I know a lot of the issues that we actually face here, some very difficult issues. We have one of the highest levels of child poverty in the country, and we need to be tackling that. We have a lot of insecurity for our children on our streets and in our homes. Something like 36 burglaries every day go unsolved in Greater Manchester, and we are part of that. So we need to be dealing with those issues. On the national areas, we've had some pretty bad decisions in recent years, and one I'd like to highlight is the recent decision by the government to open up new licences in the North Sea for drilling for oil. It is wrong, the oil they're drilling for won't even add to our national energy security, and it has to be stopped. And on the international scene, of course, we all have concerns at the moment, particularly about the situation in Israel and in Gaza, but also the situation in Ukraine, the situation with people in Chechnya as well, other areas around the world that there is insecurity. What I would like to offer is the opportunity to at least have an MP who's working for our community, for our country, and international for our planet. We need to tackle climate change, we need to tackle insecurity, we need to actually work to protect ourselves here in Rochdale and to protect our future. We need to be bringing business and jobs in, we need to be improving our environment, and we need to actually be making sure that here in Rochdale we have the housing, the education, the social services.
With 40 seconds to spare, I'll now take George Galloway, your statement.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mr. Donaldson, ladies and gentlemen. I've spent the day trying to help save Rochdale Football Club, which is just about the only institution, heart, that the town has left, having lost our A&D, having lost our maternity services, having lost our market. If we lose the football club, then there will not be anything left that is definably Rochdale, and will just be a collection of houses on the outskirts of Greater Manchester. So today, after several days of negotiating, I met with the leading figures from the best days of Rochdale Football Club. No names, but you don't have to be Einstein to work out who they are. And we are demanding that Rochdale Council step in with immediate assistance to stop the club going literally into liquidation in the next few days. And if they will do that, then we will put together a consortium of people to save Rochdale Football Club. I think this is vital. It's vital to stop the slide. Rochdale has been on the slide for years. I've also, in the last week or 10 days, had 2 meetings with the new owners of the Exchange Shopping Centre in the centre of town, and that's why I'm able to tell you that in the next few days I will be in a hard hat on site as the pagoda roof is removed and the market, the open air market, covered albeit, will re-emerge from the dead. So I can say before I'm even elected as the MP that it was me and Mr. Patel of the Adan Group that have bought the centre that brought back the open air market into Rochdale. And I'm very proud of that achievement. I've even persuaded them to make the necessary arrangements to get Primark into the town, which is a demand from all sections of the community. But the greatest of these is yet to come. Rochdale is a town where you cannot be born unless in a taxi on the way to Oldham. Rochdale is a town where you cannot die unless in an ambulance. And we, my wife and I and others, were at a care home.
Next time.
I'll tell you about it later.
Unfortunately, I couldn't give you the 40 seconds that Iain had there. Thank you both for your opening statements. Before I take questions from the public, if you do have a question, please raise your hand. We have runners with mics on either side. Please wait till the mic gets to you before you ask your question. And as I said before, please keep it succinct. And this first section that we're discussing is local issues. But if I can just start to both of you. Given where we are in 2024, there's meant to be an election according to the Prime Minister later in the year, perhaps in the autumn. So say you only have 6 months or so in Parliament once you're elected. What's your single priority for Rochdale that you want to achieve within 6 months? Iain?
I think what you can achieve within that 6 months is to challenge the situation with the sewage in our rivers, to challenge the housing associations to actually get their act together, and to challenge the police to do their job and to protect our community. And I think that those three issues particularly are doable and practical in that time. Now, unfortunately, I don't have the money to bring in people to buy centres and to do things in that sense. I'm an ordinary working class lad, and all I can bring is hard work, dedication, and the sort of sense that Rochdale needs to actually get our community back on an even track. If, however, going beyond that, you did decide to continue to support me, then I would make sure that there was a lot more coming into this area, and I would build up the connections that we need to get Rochdale rebuilt and re-strengthened. But I'm not going to pretend to you that everything is achievable in what might actually only be 35 days if the government calls the election for the same day as the locals, which is one option.
Thank you. George, same question. Your single priority for Rochdale?
I don't have the money either, Iain, but I know people who do. It's my job as the Member of Parliament to bring people with investment into the town. And that's what I pledge to do. If you force me to say only one priority, it would be to change the town hall, to change the council. I believe that the town council in Rochdale is the heart of darkness. I believe that the town council in Rochdale has to be entirely changed. I believe that the fish rots from the head, and the head is in the town hall. So if you elect me, I'll be leading a campaign to have a brand new town council in the Rochdale fine £20 million town hall.
Thank you. There'll be a question here, and then secondly, we'll take a question from the lady at the end of the row.
Thank you. My name is John Lawrence, National Housing Party leader. Why should people vote for anybody in Rochdale? There's never been any accountability in Rochdale. Satanic abuse, social workers still at the jobs, no view, Cambridge House, Richard Farnell lied to an inquiry, and then we had the rape gang scandal, and the police and the council have been unaccountable in that 50 years of all that. So why should anybody vote for you? I agree with the Green lady over here, very undemocratic that you don't have every candidate up, but a good explanation towards it, but it's still not fair. And I would say to the people of Rochdale, no matter what domination or ethnicity you have, why are you voting for these people when there's no accountability, and there never has been in Rochdale Council?
Thank you. George.
Well, you don't have to vote, of course, sir. Nobody's forcing you to vote. And As I think you probably wouldn't vote for me, I encourage you to stay at home. The reality is, though, that what you said there is absolutely true. There's been no accountability in this town. In fact, there's been a cover-up and a cover-up of things that have been wrong in this town. And that cover-up is at the door of the party that isn't sat to my right. It's Labour that needs to be putted out of Rochdale because it's they who are responsible for most of Rochdale's ills. So what I say to you is this: you know me, you know that I've got a voice, you know that I've got a voice that is amplified by the microphone I've got in front of me, but it's amplified by the fact that I have a high profile. And I will use that high profile to switch a big searchlight into the dark corners of what has happened here in Rochdale in a way that no other candidate can promise you credibly to do.
Thank you. Iain?
I would say you're right about the lack of accountability, and that isn't a lack of accountability just in Rochdale. It's across our political system. That lack of accountability is in part due to the very processes by which we elect our parliamentarians. Not every vote counts the same, and we need a system that actually provides for fair voting. We also need a system that brings power away from Westminster and here into our own communities. Because at the moment the system is that Westminster determines what councils can do, Westminster determines what individual politicians can do, and we need to get to the stage where we actually have in our region and in our communities here genuine power and genuine control over our finances and over our politics. So I would say that if you look at the Liberal Democrat approach to this, we want to change the voting system to get fair votes. We want to change the way in which our country is organised so that we have local people making local decisions about local issues.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Lisa Beckles. My question is about education for those children in Rochdale who have special educational needs and disabilities. But the facilities in Rochdale are inadequate, so many of our young people are having to either move out of areas to get adequate education, or at a minimum of 1 hour journeys every day to and from the borough. So I'm just wondering what you would do if you were elected to ensure that all our children are able to be educated in the town where they live.
Thank you. Iain?
Absolutely right. And it's a great shame on this nation that the last time, for example, higher education was addressed, and the last higher education college created was here in Rochdale, and it's the only one created in this country in the last 20 years. That shows you how little priority is given to education. We need to get decent schools, we need to get decent education, but we also need to make sure there is a massive problem for young people who've gone through the COVID period of actually catching up, and we need money put into making sure that they are able to catch up. So there is a lot of work that needs to be done, and it's a lot of work that actually needs to change in the way that we look at the whole finances of the country and the whole way in which we work. Our young people are our future. They are the workers of the future. They are the generation that will look after us when we're no longer able to, and we should be looking after them, we should be protecting them, and we should be securing their future.
Thank you. George?
Well, we have a consensus on this issue at least. In fact, I should adjust my little rap about not being able to be born in Rochdale, not being able to die in Rochdale, to, for some children, those with special needs, not being able to be schooled in Rochdale, and that's something that I promise to address. But if you'll forgive me, I have 6 children, by the grace of God. 5 of them are still at school, and I'm not happy about school for lots of reasons. And as no one else has touched on it, let me say I'm not happy with what children are being taught in school. I'm not happy about the so-called personal education that people are getting, questions of morals, questions of sexuality, questions of how many genders there are, questions of personal relations. I've got children here, so I'm choosing my words carefully. But I think that as parents, we're going to have to put our foot down about some of the materials that are being shown to our young children long before they are, in terms of maturity, able properly to process it, and often in defiance of the moral and ethical framework of their parents. They're our children, not the state's children. And I don't want my children to be taught that some things are normal that I don't believe are normal. I don't want my children taught things that undermine the family, undermine family values, and distort the thinking and development of our children. So I have a lot of questions about education. And of course, the total sum that's spent on it is important. The way in which those sums are distributed are important. But the quality of our children's education, what actually is being taught, is also something that I'm deeply concerned with.
We'll take a question, but you are allowed to debate if you want to rebuttal for any of the answers. Just say. We'll take the question, yeah?
Yeah, a couple of points. I welcome your comments about the jail. I welcome your comments about the local council. A local issue that has been going on for a long while is the Turner Brothers asbestos site. I'd like to know what you're going to do about that, because that's been going on for 20 years. We've been campaigning for 20 years to stop haphazard development, and that really needs something doing. And also, in terms of national, what's your views on PR? And I'll just end with up to date.
Yay.
Thank you. George?
Well, the issue of the asbestos, of course, comes back to the council. Only the council can ensure an end to haphazard development. Only the council can deal with these threats to environmental health. And that's why, when I was asked to give only one priority, my one priority was to put a large boot up the backside of the people who have, like a kind of mafia, got a stranglehold on this town of Rochdale and have run it into the ground. I welcome your comments about the Dale. I think you'll have worked out who I was meeting with today. We've got to get the band back together. We've got to get the people that ran the club, and maybe even, because he's sitting at home, the manager that ran the club, back to Rochdale, so that we can see that band perform again at the highest level, at least in the Brentford and Bournemouth were non-league. Look at them now. That's my ambition for Rochdale Football Club.
Thank you. And there's a question around PR. We'll take it part of the national. We'll take that on the national. That's all right.
Okay.
We'll save that for the national session.
Okay. On the question of the Templars site, we need immediate action. We've been waiting for a long time for action on this. The council hasn't done its part, and the government hasn't played its part either. What I would suggest that we need to do in the first instance is find out just how much of the site is contaminated and close that off. The rest of the ground around
I think that's all of it.
Well, no, the site is much bigger than the building that we're talking about. The actual site has more land to it. So we need to actually look at the rest of that land being taken into the nature reserve and get then proper treatment for the area where the asbestos has been a major problem. Because if we don't tackle it properly, then we're not going to make it safe. We need that asbestos removed fully, and we need to get it properly sorted out. But the site itself, there are other, the rest of the site can actually be brought into the natural area around there. So there is work that needs to be done, and I will work out hard to get various agencies together to actually make sure that that is sorted. It's something that you'll recall Paul Rowan almost got them to move on when he was the MP, and it's fallen by the wayside again since.
Thank you. Gentleman here at the front.
Thank you, gentlemen. My name is Mark Slater. I'm the chair of Rochdale Greater Manchester Tenants Union branch. Just going back to the word accountability, I think it's worth remembering that in Rochdale we were very fortunate to have an MP in Sir Tony Lloyd who was not only accessible but accountable to everybody and was universally liked across the House and admired and respected, as his funeral showed the other day. And George, I'm not sure if you're aware, but the council have already invested heavily in Rochdale Football Club, and they can be accused of many things, but that isn't one of them. And I think if you look closely at that, you'll see how much they are actually invested in the football club so far.
Thank you. Your question, please.
As far as the council is concerned, my question for you is about housing in Rochdale. Housing, social housing in Rochdale, has been in crisis since the year 2012, when the social housing stock was transferred over to a housing association. What I'd like to know is what your experience of social housing in Rochdale is, and what impact you think you could have on the social housing crisis in Rochdale, the positive impact. In fact, it's a simple question. Do you know how many people there are on the waiting list tonight that will be sleeping in bed and breakfast and in hostels, these families? Just a simple question. Do you know how many people there are on the waiting list in Rochdale?
Thank you. Iain.
From the day I entered into politics, the one thing I always said was if I don't know the direct answer, then I will answer directly, and the answer is no, I don't know the full numbers. What I do know is this: I campaigned very heavily against the same situation in Manchester when the Manchester housing was being moved away from council housing into what is effectively private sector housing companies. And I think that that was a very bad and a very wrong move. There were alternatives available at the time. I would also say that one of the biggest problems in terms of social housing is that people are having to build on today's numbers for tomorrow's problems. And if you look back at when, over the last few years, we've had one of the highest levels of single occupancy. And if you've got single occupancy and you build a house that is going to meet the needs of multiple occupancy, because that's where things are going, what you get then is a situation where, due to the bedroom tax, for example, you are actually being penalised in terms of whether people can afford to live as single occupants or multiple occupancy, and that is damaging very much the national ability of housing associations to build. You've also got the ridiculous situation of the affordable rents policy, where people are actually having to pay, on market value rents, policy, where people are having to actually pay according to what the market value is in the private sector for social housing. And that has to change. The number of people who were put into absolute distress because they were having to lose their houses because of the increase in the cost when that was introduced, for housing associations that didn't need to make that increase, was terrible. Both of those policies were introduced between 2002 and 2010 by the Labour Party. And one of my great shames is the fact that the Liberal Democrats were not able to negotiate to get rid of those two policies. But it is something I have always fought against and I will always fight against. In terms of getting the housing numbers up, the affordable housing numbers up, the other thing we have to tackle is the ability of private builders to say, yes, we will build 10% of these houses will be social housing, and then to go to the courts and say, well, actually, it's not commercially viable to do that, so we're going to sell the whole lot and get away with it. We've got to change that as well, because that is actually preventing us from getting decent housing. And the final thing I would say in terms of affordable housing is it has to be affordable for the people here, not affordable on a national scale. Because measuring affordability according to what we can pay or what we're having to pay in London and then applying it to Rochdale is absolutely ludicrous. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done on affordable housing and on making housing affordable. The other thing we need to do is increase the number of council houses that we have, because one of the big losses has been the number of council houses that have been moved into the private sector because of the right to buy, and they have not been replaced.
Thank you. Just before George answers, if there's anybody else who's got a question, we've got a question here at the front and a lady there. They can be ready for the mics. George.
Well, the council has one defender here, and I commend his bravery in speaking up for a council that is almost without support across all communities in the town of Rochdale. But I'm not going to argue with you about what the council has done in the past for Rochdale Football Club, beyond saying I don't agree with your interpretation of events. What I'm interested in is what they're going to do now that the club is facing liquidation. And if they don't do something right now, the club will no longer exist. And so if you're a friend of Rochdale Council and the councillors, I ask you to take this message away now, that this is beyond the 11th hour. If you don't do something now, there will be no Rochdale Football Club. It will have gone the way of the A&D, it will have gone the way of the maternity services, it will have gone the way of the open air market, and the council and the councillors will never be forgiven. What do I know about social housing? I was born in a slum and lived all of my childhood and all of my teenage years in a council house. And I don't like these euphemisms about social housing. I believe in council housing. Why? Because if you're in a council house, you get to elect your landlord and you get to remove your landlord. I opposed and won in ballots in the East End of London the attempt to privatise council housing through the so-called arm's length management organisations, ALMOs, to semi-privatise what were public assets that the public had paid for and that the public were able to control the conduct of their landlord. So I know plenty about what you call social housing. And we, the Workers' Party, have a policy of mass house building. Why? To bring prices down, to bring rents down on the simple principle of supply and demand. It's the shortage of housing that makes the rents high. It's the shortage of housing that makes the house prices high. And if we have a mass program of house building, we're putting bricklayers back to work. We're putting joiners back to work. We're putting electricians back to work. We're putting plumbers back to work. Glaziers back to work. That's what we need across this whole country. So, my answer to you is this: that the Rochdale Town Council has failed on housing like it's failed on everything else, and it's time to get them out.
Thank you, George. Thank you. We'll take two more questions from the floor on this topic area. Thank you, sir. We'll take two more questions from the floor on this topic area. The gentleman first and then the lady.
Okay.
Iain first.
Right, so my name is John Carden. I'm not chair of any group that some of you seem to be affiliated with here. I'm speaking as a wandering member, as a resident of Rochdale. The one concern that I have, what I want to answer for is traffic is increasing, whether it's coming off the motorway, whether it's coming in our streets, whether it's coming from here to the road down the road. What I want to know is, what would you do to alleviate traffic in and out of Rochdale?
George, quick answer.
Well, again, this is the problem with asking local questions. These are not matters for Parliament. These are matters for the Mayor of Greater Manchester and for the Town Council. But I'll agree with you that the Town Council, like on everything else, has grossly mismanaged the traffic circumstances here in the town. There are lanes missing, there are no lines, there are no proper signage on the ground of the roads, there's potholes you could lie down and sleep in. I spoke with the taxi drivers en masse over the last couple of days, and they described the nightmare of many of the roads in Rochdale that look like they have been subject to a bombing raid in Afghanistan. The state of the roads and the traffic is not something I can affect as a Member of Parliament, but I've got a voice, and I'll definitely be your voice in the Town Hall, towards the Town Hall, towards Andy Burnham, if he's re-elected as the Mayor of Greater Manchester. I'll be your voice on these issues.
Thank you, George. Iain?
I think George is right on the fact that it's the Council and the Mayor that have let us down on the question of transport, on the question of traffic, on the question of roads, and on the question of public transport. We've got a situation here where we've got this wonderful tram that comes all the way through into Rochdale, but we can't get a bus from one part of Rochdale to another. We've got proposals now to extend the tram when all we actually need is a nice little link from one railway station to another on lines that exist. We've got traffic coming in and around Rochdale where people are actually having to use cars when they could use public transport if we had the public transport network. And Andy Burnham has quite clearly stated that he will not be doing anything about the state of the routes and the state of the transport. He's fully taken control of the buses in a half's time. So we've got to wait a year and a half for Labour to do anything on this. We need action now. We need decent bus routes, we need decent transport, and we need those potholes filled in.
All right, thank you. And final question from the floor in this section.
I'd like to make this a quick question. I worked in education all my life. Many years ago, there was a school called Sparrow Hill, which many people here might know, and it was doing amazing things, and this was before national curriculum. I've had several jobs in Rochdale. One for a considerable period, I managed Rochdale's early years individual needs team, and we did a great project that only happened in 5 places across the country. I would ask both of you, we've all heard about the deprivation, and the most important part of education, most teachers will tell you, is the early years. And we need to do something, we need some sort of project. And over the years, Rochdale has done some wonderful things, and then they all got ditched, like all the children's centre stuff, and that wonderful curriculum was dumped by the Tory government. Within weeks, they took it off screen and everything. If we could have some sort of project where Rochdale did something really special for the youngest children here, because they are some of the most deprived children in this country, would you both have you any ideas around how you could fund that and break free from the national government?
I think when you're talking about the very younger age children, I don't understand why there is a national curriculum. What there should be is encouragement for them to learn, to be able to learn how to learn, and to learn how to use that knowledge. I think we need to be. It does come down to an extent to money, but it also comes down to actually the staffing and making sure we've got the right people in place, the dedicated youth workers, dedicated teachers who can work with that younger generation. We are losing a generation at the moment, and it's absolutely frightening how little is being done for that generation. Now, you may remember we introduced the pupil premium, which helped for a while, and that has been again moved away from, it's been scrapped. We need to actually focus on this that are specifically for that generation. We need to make sure that that's done. And one of the ways in which we can perhaps have a better way of doing that is to change the way in which we are governed. Because the way we are governed means that the moment the central government decides it's got some other scheme to pay for, it pulls all the money out of one area and puts it into another. We need to actually have local control of that. But that local control also needs to come with a decent local council. We don't have that at the moment either.
George.
Well, we have a saying in Glasgow, it's the squeaky wheel that gets the grease. You have to roar like a lion for resources. If you're meek, if you're mild, if you're compliant, if you are a servant to a master, a party whip, government or opposition whip, and the opposition, then you will be very lucky to get the proper resources for your area. Again, I rely on my voice. I will be the loudest roar for resources, for Rochdale. And guess what? If we win this seat, they'll do anything to get it back, and they'll be running after you to try and fund things that they refused to fund before. But I look forward to working with you as long as I'm here, because I like your spirit. The town of Rochdale was a pioneer. In fact, the new open-air market is going to be called the Pioneer Market. I think that's a wonderful name. It's a wonderful concept, a wonderful spirit, and I claim credit for it. The Rochdale pioneers gave birth to an idea that swept the whole world. I've been in townships in South Africa, favelas in Brazil. I've been all over the world and found the co-op. And I've been in Toad Lane where it started. Rochdale was the pioneer of that. Let's make Rochdale great again. Let's make Rochdale known throughout the country and throughout the world for pioneering new ideas like the kind you're looking for.
Thank you. Just before we move on to national issues, and just very, very quickly, one area that I'm surprised hasn't come up in the audience is around crime rates in Rochdale. And this is a question that we got through online through the registration form. Each of you, 30 seconds, what do you intend to do to reduce crime rates in Rochdale? Iain first.
First thing we need is bobbies on the beat. Second thing we need is to actually have the community officers talking to the local community rather than sitting in offices and thinking about what the community might be saying. And the third thing we need is to be able to trust our police so that we can work with them to bring security to the area rather than the situation at the moment where we don't even know who most of them are.
Thank you. George?
30 seconds?
30 seconds.
Well, that really gives me time to say that my experience with the Rochdale police has been first class. Somebody tore down our banner, ripped it and put it into their boot. Thankfully, good friends of mine, whose premises it was, had very good CCTV, and the man's registration plate and face were in the hands of the police very promptly. And by 10 o'clock that evening, they had arrested him. It's going to be very interesting, brother and sisters, when we hear the name of the man and to whom he's affiliated.
That will be an easy crime to solve without many details. Just before I move on to national issues, Iain, George has said that he wants to reopen the maternity unit in Rochdale. What is your position on maternity services in Rochdale?
The maternity services in Rochdale do need to be reopened, but before we can do that, we need to actually secure the maternity services in Bury and in Oldham that are actually providing those services at the moment, because even there, the staffing numbers are not what they should be. We've got to actually get the staffing sorted out, because it all comes down to staffing. So part of the response is let's get Oldham and Bury sorted, and then let's focus on making sure that we get maternity services back in Rochdale.
Okay, thank you. So moving on to...
Can I debate that?
You can. Go on.
Why shouldn't Rochdale have its own maternity services? Why should we wait for Oldham and Bury? Why should we have the right of Rochdale? Seriously, why should we be campaigning to save other terms maternity services, rather than having properly defended our own maternity services and properly fighting for their return. That is a demand I will never cease to make. And I won't leave Rochdale until we've got those maternity services restored.
In part, George is correct. We need the services here. But if we, in fighting for those services here, are not fighting to make sure that women who are pregnant now in Rochdale are not getting the care and the services they need, because the staffing is bad in the hospitals that they do currently go to, that is equally bad. I would say that we have got to make sure that we secure the services, and I would say that we have to work towards the point where we can get the maternity services back in Rochdale. But right now there are women who are in jeopardy because the services in other areas are not getting the staffing they need.
We're going to move on to national issues. Thank you for that. So if there are questions, is it national related issues? Right, can you bring it back here? Whilst that is coming, just to get us started on this, we're all living through a cost of living crisis at the moment, a national cost of living crisis. What effect can your voice have in the midst of this crisis, George?
Well, the country's in a complete mess, as you saw from the House of Commons last night. All of our institutions are hollowed out and collapsing, and trust in all of our institutions is disappearing fast. We're in a very dangerous moment in Britain, and if we don't, I don't think we've been in a more difficult situation since 1940, since the summer of 1940 and the fall of France, when we stood alone with Hitler at the Channel Ports. We've never been in a more grave crisis, and there's no Churchill in this picture to step forward and steady the ship. We are in real trouble, and you cannot separate out the cost of living crisis from the economic crisis, from the social crisis, from the cultural crisis in the country, from the foreign policy crises, multiple, that we face. And so, on the issue that you asked me to deal with, I have to take refuge in this. We are the Workers' Party. We believe that the workers, by hand and by brain, white collar, blue collar, are the source of all wealth. We create all wealth. It's usually filched in part by the few, but we are the many. And if we stand up as the many, then we will be able to take what is rightfully ours. So we believe in trade unions, we believe in cooperatives, we believe in the public sector having an important role in the economy. We believe in fair shares for all. If you want a person to identify our ideas with, it would be the late and great Mr. Tony Benn, the best Prime Minister we never had. We are full of common sense, social-ism. That's what we stand for.
Thank you. Iain.
Can I just ask you a question about housing?
No, sir, please sit down. Thank you.
Neither you should be ashamed.
Thank you. You can leave. Thank you very much.
I told you the councillor had a supporter in the audience.
Thank you. Just to remind everybody, please keep comments unless you're asking questions to yourselves. You've got a chance to see the candidates at the end if you want to express your views in a more pressing way. Iain, the question was around the cost of living crisis and how you can add your voice to help address that.
The cost of living crisis has been exacerbated by what Liz trusted, but that is not the real cause. It is the way in which we organise our society. We need to move away from this society in which money is vested in a small number of people when it is actually created by so many of us. The way we do that is through what Rochdale pioneered, the cooperative approach. If we can get to the stage where we, the people, own the companies that serve us and that work with us, if we can get to the stage where the cooperative principle is actually fully organised and fully in power in this country in terms of the economic situation, in terms of the economy, in terms of running our businesses, then we will be in a much better position, because as long as the workers and the people own the means of production, the workers and the people can control it. And the one area where I would disagree slightly with the idea of the government nationalising everything is that doesn't put it in the hands of the people, it puts it in the hands of the people at the top. We need to change that, and that's why, for example, I would like to see a lot of the big companies that are running our services now mutualised or cooperatised so that it is we the people who control them.
Thank you.
Mr. Donaldson, you need to join the Workers' Party for but for the avoidance of doubt, we don't believe that everything should be in the hands of the state. Not at all. Anyone who's ever seen a suit made in a state tailor knows that the private businesses are better at making suits. Anyone who's ever eaten in a state restaurant knows that my friend Ahmad there at the back of the room as a private restaurateur. The essential public utilities should be in the hands of the people. The railways, the water, the electricity, the gas, the post. We once owned all of those things, and they were better when we owned them than they are now that they are privatised.
Thank you.
Hello, yeah. Before I ask my national question, I just want to thank both of you for coming today on behalf of the rest of the community. So at least you had the courage to come, and like the Labour and the Conservative representatives, they should have been here. We should be able to ask them questions. We're not able to do that today. So thank you. The national question that I had was just linked onto education. I've got a son who's going to university now. He's having to pay, or he's having to loan a huge amount of money, and he's going to have to pay that back at commercial rates eventually. So, correct me if I'm wrong, but you were the party, the Liberal Democrats, who collaborated with the Tories to introduce student loans, because when I went to university, it was free. I got a grant because I came from a poor background. You were the party who promised not to, and then when you came into collaboration with the Tories, you actually did the dirty.
Can I just correct?
My question is, how interested you?
Just
you say one thing
before you go on.
what's your power?
Before you go with the rest of the question, can I just correct you? Tuition fees were introduced by the Labour Party and the Labour government in 1998.
And you promised to scrap them, and then didn't.
The difficulty with that was the financial mess the Labour Party left the country.
So I think that the whole of the question is how can we then trust what the Lib Dems say? I think that is what the question is.
I think one has to learn by one's mistakes, and one of the mistakes we made was making a commitment that, quite frankly, we didn't know that we wouldn't have the money to sort out. The Labour Party left this. The Labour Party left this country. The Labour Party left this.
Excuse me, sir. Thank you.
The Labour Party left this country in a financial mess. What we did manage to do was we did stop what was proposed at the time, which was totally removing the cap on tuition fees, and that was proposed in the Brown report that had been commissioned by the Labour Party. So that was actually stopped. But yeah, I agree with you. Personally, I think that if people are going to be going into academic education and into academia, that they should get proper support and they should get proper tuition. But I would also say that people don't.
Is that a pledge?
I'm saying what I think, George, just as you often do. What I am saying is this, that also needs, if we're going to look at that, we've got to also look at apprenticeships, we've got to also look at higher education, we've got to look at the whole gambit of our education system, and I think we need to actually review the whole situation in education. Because the way things are organised at the moment, and I can't make any promises about what tomorrow will bring, all I can say is I will be working damn hard to make sure that we make education available to everyone through the point of need.
I take back that promise of a ticket for the Workers' Club. I take it back. Look, I never went to university. I left school at 16. I went to work in Michelin Tires. I've worked all of my life. And it was indeed the Labour government of Tony Blair that introduced the tuition fees. I vividly remember as I was going into the lobby to vote against it, against the three-line whip while I was still a Labour MP. The chief whip now disappeared, Nick Brown. Anybody seen him? Nick Brown standing at the entrance to the lobby saying to me, "It's only £1,000. And I told him, and how right I was, that once you breach the principle, that £1,000, and I underestimated, I said that £1,000 will soon be £5,000. In fact, it was soon £10,000 and more in certain places. So I opposed the introduction of tuition fees, even while under a three-line whip to support them. But I'm sorry, Mr. Donaldson, I like you a lot, but I have to make this point. If you make your election pledge that you're going to abolish tuition fees, and then you vote to keep tuition fees, nothing you say any further can ever be believed. And with respect, it wasn't because Golden Brown, famous here in Rochdale, for keeping his microphone on when he had it switched off. It wasn't because Golden Brown left the country with not enough money for you to fulfill your pledge. You traded your pledge for 5 pence on plastic bags in supermarkets. The government gave you that, and in return, you ditched your promise to freeze tuition fees. Now, I'm not necessarily against 5p for a plastic bag. I'm actually against plastic bags. I'm so old, I like brown paper bags. I like brown paper and string. That's how old I am. But to trade a whole 2 generations university tuition fees for 5p on plastic bags wasn't much of a bargain.
Thank you.
I want to also echo and thank both of you for taking the time in coming to this programme and answering the questions and being accountable from all of us. But I want to go back to what you said regarding why you went in coalition with the Conservatives. All of the problems, this is my opinion, all of the problems we face today is because of 13 years of disaster which you supported. Yeah. You could have joined Labour, you could have made a coalition. I think it's a total distortion to say that everything's Labour's fault at that time. You, with your whatever reason your party had, are responsible for all of the problems we have today in the NHS and education, because you cut everyone's budget, whether it's EMA grants, whatever it may be, you supported that. You can't deny that. You're directly responsible for the chaos we have today. So why should we now give you our vote? Again, I'm speaking generically, I'm not saying specifically that every policy you support, but by you agreeing to support the Conservative Party when there was an alternative, you do have responsibility for that.
So this is going back to 2010 coalition government. Just before you answer, are there any other questions from the audience in terms of national issues? For us to pass the mic, there aren't. Okay. So we'll take these answers and we'll move on to international. Thank you.
Right, to be absolutely frank with you, the first thing I would say is there weren't enough Labour MPs plus Liberal Democrat MPs to form a government. The second thing I would say is when the Labour Party were actually asked, their response was, you work with our manifesto or there is no agreement. And on both of those things, I'm afraid that we could not agree, because that would, for example, as has already been mentioned, have meant the implementation of the Brown report, which would have actually taken the tuition fees sky high, even more so than they are now, but would have been so much else that would have actually been damaging for the country. That said, I was not a part of those negotiations, I wasn't actually in the room, but what I can say is that if I were in the room and if I were there, then making sure that we fulfil our manifesto commitments is one of the things that I will personally commit to make sure that we do.
Thank you. George, do you want to respond to that? There wasn't a question. Okay. There was a question we did have around PR, and the gentleman who asked it, I think, is now left, but in general, what are your perceptions around PR proportional representation?
Thank you, Chair. I should have said so in response to his question. I apologise to him as he's left. I have all of my life supported proportional representation and indeed had personal conversations with both Tony Blair and Gordon Brown and put to them that when you've just had a landslide victory on a minority vote, that's the time to introduce proportional representation. Mr. Blair had a landslide majority of, I think, 178. And I put to him that if you now introduce proportional representation, there will never be a majority Tory government ever again. And if he had taken my advice and done it, you'd never heard of Boris Johnson.
In terms of you would never have heard of Boris Johnson, absolutely right. We need PR in this country. Proportional representation, fair voting is something that without it, our votes don't all count equally, our voices don't all count equally, we need to change that. One thing that proportional representation would bring, and my party has been the exponents of proportional representation for many years now, many years. One thing it would bring is that you would have, if you had multi-member seats and proportional representation, then communities that are currently underrepresented would be able to have their voice properly heard in Parliament. It would change the nature of Parliament. So PR is absolutely essential for the democratic integrity of our country, for getting back to the situation where our politicians are responsible to us, the people, not to parties or to party constraints. Just on the whip, by the way, that was mentioned earlier, the difference between the Liberal Democrat whip and the Labour and Tory whip is the Labour and Tory whip is by absolute and the Liberal Democrat whip is by consent. So we actually can define the whip where, on a personal level, if I think something is wrong, I will speak out and say it is wrong, and I will do that because our whip is not imposed, our whip is by consent.
Thank you. Is there a question?
Yeah, there is a question. Yeah, so I was asked to ask this on behalf of a ladies group who are not comfortable asking questions themselves, which is fine. So it's not for me as such. However, the issue is grooming. So with regards to grooming, there is a lot of concern in the community that there are still individuals out there who may or may not be involved in grooming, but in general the approach that was taken towards that case and the approach that still exists now towards grooming where mothers do not feel safe for their children or themselves around certain individuals. So just in terms of grooming, what can you say against that?
So, yeah, this isn't just a local issue, but we've heard of these grooming gangs in different parts of the country. So, what can we do to address that effectively, George?
Yeah, it's definitely not a local issue. It is an issue locally, but it is a national and international issue. And the people who do it not because of the colour of their skin, but because of the darkness in their heart, because of their depraved perversion. And that, I'm afraid, crosses all communities in all parts of the world. I was going to say it crosses men, but there are even women involved in these unspeakable depravities. And I make no party political point, but the first groomer in Rochdale was Sir Cyril Smith. He was the number one groomer. He was the chief. And he was not a Pakistani. No. The Reverend Paul Flores, formerly of this parish, is not a Muslim preacher. He was a Christian preacher. Hypocrites, both of them, of course. There's no place in any religion for this kind of behavior, this kind of depravity. All I can say is this. I told you earlier I have 6 children, I have 5 young children, and I have 4 young grandchildren. I am just about the last man you could think of that would express any scintilla of tolerance towards such unspeakable behaviour. You'd have to stop me from stringing them up. I know you're against the death penalty, but you would have to stop me from stringing them up. So let's root out grooming. Let's root out the sexual exploitation of children. And let's do it irrespective of what colour they are and what religion they pretend to profess.
I don't disagree with the word that George has just said, and I mean all of the words that he's just said. Grooming is something that is from the top of society to the bottom of society. Now, I know for a fact that when my colleague Paul Rowan raised the issues that were being raised about Cyril, the police said there was no case to answer. So where we need to start on that is by actually tackling the view of that the police may have and that our enforcement agencies have, so that we can say to them, look, this is not acceptable, this must not continue, and when you are given a case, you must treat it seriously, you must look into it properly, and you must deal with it. The other thing that we need to do is make sure that once people have been convicted, that they face the full law, not partial law. We need to actually make sure that they are not in a position ever again to do what they have done.
Thank you. Just before we move on to international issues, just one final question on national. Do you think that tax burden is too high in this country at the moment? Iain.
I think that the tax burden is too high on some of the lowest income people in this country, and I think it is too low on some of the highest income people in this country. And we need to address that, and we need to address it properly. It's one of the reasons why, and I know that you don't like the coalition, but it's one of the reasons why we raised the basic tax threshold, and why we need to continue to do that until we get to the stage where that tax, raising that tax threshold actually enables people to live on the money that they're able to earn. Further than that, we need to actually use some of the money that the wealthier people have to support those people who cannot even reach the tax threshold with their earnings. So we need to sort that. And many of those people are old, our pensioners, but many of those people are also our children. So, in answer to your question, yes and no. Yes, it's too high for the poor, and no, it's too low for the rich.
Thank you. George.
Okay, you're back in the workers' party. That's exactly the right answer. It's too high for the poorest and it's too low for the richest. And we argued for a windfall tax, for example, for all these companies that made uncountable extra billions of pounds in profit during the COVID period, talking about companies like Amazon, for example, who pay hardly any tax at all, and yet, as a direct result of lockdown and so on, saw their profits astronomically rise. That might be history, albeit recent history. Let's talk about one that is current right now. British Gas's profits have multiplied 10 times. The price of gas is exactly to the penny what it was in 2018. How can that possibly be when your gas bill has at least doubled, if not trebled, in that period? That is profiteering on a grand scale, and the government has connived with it and protected these corporations from it. If you're a small businessman here in Rochdale, running a restaurant or running a shop, the VAT man will be down on you like a ton of bricks. But if you are part of the multi-billion-pound corporations, you'll never see the taxman. You'll have a sweetheart deal with the taxman. So corporations and the very richest among us are taxed too low and the poorest people taxed too high. But we have a very strong view that what we need, and this is one of the disagreements that we have, you called for the shutting down of the North Sea so that we don't extract any more oil and gas from it. So who are we going to get the oil and gas from? Russia. We're going to buy it from foreign countries and be at their mercy in terms of price and, of course, in extremis, even supply. What if all the oil producers in the Gulf, just to flirt with the next issue of international politics, what they say, well, you're not getting any more gas or oil from us. What are we going to do? Go back to the Ice Age here? We're standing on 1,000 years of coal. This is the anniversary of the miners' strike in Britain, 1984-85. We're standing on 1,000 years of our own energy source. In the North Sea, by the grace of God, we have a bounty of oil and gas. I say let's harvest it. Let's have as much of our own energy, not dependent on foreign countries, as possible. We believe in growth, unlike some. We believe in production. We believe in making wealth. Everything you see around you here was made by somebody. Nothing is made by nobody. Everything is made by somebody. Some fools say there's no longer a working class. Well, who made these lights, this floor, this stage, this microphone, these cars outside? They were all made by workers. Our problem is, overwhelmingly, they're no longer made by our workers because our industries have been closed down as a result of Thatcherite, then Blairite, neoliberal economic policies.
If I could just come back on a couple of things that have just been said. Firstly, the oil in the North Sea does not come into our security in terms of the nation's oil, because it is the wrong sort of oil for us to use, and that is simple scientific fact. We need to be looking at energy, and our energy sources that we need to be looking at are the natural energy sources, the renewable energy sources. Wind power. Why is there a moratorium on building new wind turbines in this country when we've actually got to a situation where wind power is able to provide a lot of the energy that we need? Tidal power. Well, we managed under the coalition to get it up to somewhere in the region of 20%, and that was basically the highest we had reached at that point, but it is getting higher and higher. Tidal power provides us with energy. We're not even partway there with a lot of the renewable resources that we need to be getting, and we need to be working with, and we need to be generating with. We need to get our technology and our science working on getting those energies into position. But in terms of the other part of what's been said, in terms of the profits for the companies, I turn to another company because it's absolutely right about gas and about the energy companies, but I turn to the water companies. They're about to put our water charges up by 8%. That's twice the current rate of inflation. They are still taking massive bonuses out of it. They're still paying massive dividends, and they can't even clean the muck out of our return. You know what I mean when I say muck. We need to get that sorted as well. It's about time that we actually had proper control over those companies that once were ours and are now in private hands, making private money for private people overseas and bringing no benefits to us in the UK. Thank you.
Moving on then to the final kind of key topic area. This is the one which has the most interest, understandably so, through the registration link. And this is around international issues. So if there are questions that you have, I'm sorry, we're going to have to move on. Just some time. If we've got time at the end, we'll come back to any further questions we have on national. So if you do have a question, please do raise your hand. Sister at the front here, and the brother there. with the question. Could you do these and then we'll take them? Whilst that is happening, yesterday we've seen what's happening in Parliament, where the House of Commons couldn't agree amongst themselves which motion that they were going to vote for, just words for a ceasefire. What are your perceptions about what you saw last night in Parliament? George, you've been there, you've spent many years there, you can stand up if you want. What did you think about yesterday? You want to grab your mic?
There was no question about which motion should have been taken. That decision was made centuries ago. The House of Commons works on precedent. The precedent is clear. I was almost 30 years in Parliament, and I'm a student of parliamentary history. And there has never, ever been anything like the decision that the Speaker of the House of Commons made last night. And the decision that he made was made for one reason only: to protect Keir Starmer's protection of Israel. That's the only reason it was. And even worse, it has now morphed into an entirely false narrative, doubly false, and very dangerous indeed. I speak as someone who has been assaulted in the street whilst a member of Parliament. That's why I started wearing this hat. A man in an Israeli army uniform attacked me in the street in Ladbroke Grove, and I was hospitalised, and he went to prison for 20 months. And by the way, none of these journalists gave a damn about it. Neither did the then Speaker of the House of Commons give a damn about it. Only Peter Oborne of the entire British National Press Corps even interviewed me about it and made the obvious point that if this could happen to me today, then it could happen to anyone else in Parliament tomorrow, as indeed, in a ghastly, horrific way, it did not once but twice. Joe Cox and then David Amos. You have to take threats of violence against members of Parliament seriously. I wish they had done so when it happened to me. But that doesn't allow you to call every protester, every demonstrator, everyone trying to lobby their member of Parliament some kind of would-be terrorist. And that's what they are now doing today. In fact, it has morphed twice. Now, it wasn't just fear of the mob that forced the Speaker of the House to rule as he did. It's now fear of the Muslim mob. Although none of the people outside Parliament, or virtually none of them, were Muslims. Look at the picture of the demonstrators outside. They were overwhelmingly white English people. And if you look at the demonstrations in Manchester, in Rochdale, in London, all over this country, over Gaza, they are overwhelmingly white people. So why are Muslims now getting the blame for the fact that millions of British people are simply horrified by what they're seeing on their telephones coming out of Gaza? Children maimed and murdered, left under the rubble, being eaten by dogs, their mothers killed as they cling to the body, as it's taken away, the mothers clinging to the body of their children. How could you not be horrified by that? You'd have to be without a soul not to be horrified by that. So instead of pretending that the British Parliament is somehow under siege from Muslims that are going to harm them, why not tell the truth that this is all about the fact that this party and that party are deeply complicit in the mass murder of thousands of people, most of them women and children? That's why people are angry, and they're right to be angry, and they would be without soul if they were not angry. These hypocrites that have turned this whole thing on its head. I mean, Keir Starmer's wrecked the Labour Party over the defence of Israel. Now he's wrecked Parliament. Now the Speaker will probably be forced to resign. And we'll stand in the by-election in Rochdale, by the way, in Chorley, if he goes. This has gravely damaged the remaining honour of the House of Commons. I'm going to have to go there if I'm elected by you next week and refer to these people as honourable gentlemen and honourable ladies, when the vast majority of them have no honour at all.
I'm not sure how to get out of this chair.
So the question was, what are your perceptions about what you saw in Parliament last night?
What we saw in Parliament last night was a disgrace. What we saw was our Parliament turned into a complete argument, a complete shambles, a complete omni-shambles. What we saw was the people who were supposed to represent us, instead of debating the deaths that are happening, instead of debating the destruction of ordinary people's lives, were arguing amongst themselves about their own futures. And that is disgraceful. If I am elected by you, then I will be going into a chamber, as George has said, where we have to call people honourable. Well, I hope they learn what honour means. Because last night's antics were the antics you would expect, not from a parliament, but from a mob. We need to move on this issue. We need to get from the past to the future, and that means going through the present. And to do that, we need respect, mutual respect. We need all to say, this is not a matter where the ordinary people should be put into the channels of hatred. I'm trying to use my words carefully here, because it angers me what I see up there. It angers me what I see happening to ordinary people in their ordinary lives. And we need to make sure that when we speak with restraint, we speak with dignity, and we speak about the issue that is facing us. And the issue that is facing us right now is we need an end to the attack on Gaza. We need an immediate ceasefire that is permanent and that is bilateral. Then we need to get the hostages out. Then we need to actually make sure we're getting the aid in, and that has to happen simultaneously. But most importantly, we need a two-state solution. We need to recognise Palestine. And I will be urging the British Parliament to do that now, not to wait until all this is over. Because until Palestine can speak for itself on the international stage, how can we expect them to have their voices heard?
Thank you. The sister here.
Okay, thank you. We're living fairly unique time. We have this election now, and another one probably by the end of the year. But there's also another election over in the United States, which may well terminate Donald Trump. How would you deal with him and his rhetoric against minority groups as a member of Parliament?
Yeah.
I find that prospect frightening. I find it frightening for many reasons, but not least because we would be dealing with an American president who is known to have attempted to corrupt the American democratic system, to corrupt the way in which things are done in America. He is an American president who is clearly racist, an American president who, whilst he's quite happy for people to fly in on planes because they can afford it, he's not happy for people to cross borders to try and get work, to try and get their own lives sorted out. And that is disgraceful. How I would deal with him? I really, truthfully, honestly hope I never have to. I really, truthfully, honestly hope that the American people have the sense not to put him in that position.
Thank you. George.
Does that mean you're supporting Joe Biden then? Yeah. Joe Biden is a mass murderer. Joe Biden's so bad, I would prefer Donald Trump to Joe Biden. This liberal, small L, and now big L also, nonsense, presupposes that Joe Biden is the lesser of two evils, but he isn't. He's actually the greater of two evils. Both of them are evil. One of them's berserk, and the other one is completely, utterly demented, senile. He doesn't know where he is. He can't control his bodily functions, as the Pope found out in the Vatican on a presidential visit quite recently. Which one of these mutton heads are you going to choose? I'm supporting Dr. Jill Stein, a friend of mine, who's the candidate of the United States Green Party, a real working class and environmental champion. Never fall into the trap of this greater and lesser evil. That way, evil always wins. Even if you can decide which is the greater of the two evils, or the lesser, even if you could, I mean, if you ask me, is Rishi Sunak or Keir Starmer, which of these is the lesser of two evils? I've got to tell you, on balance, I think Keir Starmer is the greater of the two evils, though both of them are evil. Let's stop voting for evil. Let's stop asking people to vote for evil. Let's build independent political forces, like I'm trying to do here, and people are trying to do all over this country, in London, in Birmingham, in the rest of this region, and in Manchester. Let's get independents and small parties, third parties. Let's get everyone other than the two cheeks of the same backside inside the parliaments and inside the White House. If you keep voting for Joe Biden because Donald Trump is a vulgar oaf, you might well see the end of the world. Joe Biden is more likely to blow up the world than Donald Trump is.
We've got a sister here. Is anybody else with a question on the international issues? Okay, just a second, we've got a sister first.
Hi, so my family and I are first-hand witnesses of the genocide that is taking place on this side. My question to, George Galloway is that you are leading your campaign with a pro-Palestinian stance. If you are to gain our trust and become a Rochdale MP, what are the tangible steps that you will take in order to bring about a complete ceasefire in Gaza? Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, I'm not just about a complete ceasefire. A ceasefire is a necessary but completely insufficient condition for the rescue of the Palestinian people. That's why I'm so opposed to Keir Starmer's motion last night, which was for a humanitarian pause. What, so you could open fire again when the people have had a dinner? When Netanyahu decides to restart the genocide? I believe in a ceasefire, a complete Israeli withdrawal. You talked about hostages earlier. What about the thousands of Palestinian hostages in the dungeons of Israel? The son of the greatest of them was on my show last night, Arab Barghouti. Take a look at the interview. He'll tell you the numbers of the Palestinian hostages that have been taken and being held in the dungeons of Israel. So, a complete ceasefire, a complete withdrawal of Israeli forces, and all for all prisoner swap an end to the occupation of Gaza and Jerusalem and the West Bank, and the creation of a Palestinian state. That's what I stand for, and more importantly, you mentioned that I need to gain your trust. More importantly, I have been for 50 years, 50 years. I have been one of the most prominent campaigners for Palestinian rights and for the policy I have just adumbrated. And it's a big mistake to reduce all this to the slogan, ceasefire now. It really is. Because I've lived through so many ceasefires. I've lived through more ceasefires than I could count, and they always end up with the Palestinians being murdered over and over again. It's an end to the occupation we need. An end to the occupation, not just of Gaza, but of all Palestinian lands. What will I do? I'll speak like this. For you, in Parliament, in a way that nobody else will, and maybe in a way that nobody else could. I will go into the House of Commons like a tornado. 10 days from now, if you elect me, Rishi Sunak and Keir Starmer will be terrified as they see me coming through those swing doors, and you know why.
You're welcome to respond.
Just to say, my heart goes out to you, as it does to all the people in my family in the situation in Gaza at the moment. In terms of what we can do, what you're seeing from Layla, our spokesperson, the stance that we have taken, the stance that we've taken for a long time. We need to get to that two-state solution. We need to give Palestine its own voice, its own control, and give it its lands back. It needs to have the lands that were actually agreed in and that are illegally occupied returned. That is the starting point. But then there needs to be, by two-state solution, it also means that the only people are able to work together, that we can actually rebuild. And it will need a massive rebuild now. Much bigger rebuild than we have seen in this world. And that also is something the international community is going to have to take on board and is going to have to deal with. But right now, seriously, my heart goes out to you.
Thank you.
I rise only because you have 4 times said two-state solution. Where is this Palestinian state? Where's it going to be? What are the boundaries of this Palestinian state? How do you connect the West Bank to the Gaza Strip when they're not contiguous? Do you have in mind the kind of South African Bantu stance that the apartheid regime posited as a solution to the apartheid crisis? Because if you do, I'm not with you on that. I supported the Oslo Agreement because President Arafat, whose deathbed I stood at, and who was my friend for decades, persuaded me that the Oslo Agreement, the two-state solution, was the best that the Palestinians could achieve. And on the principle that I was in solidarity with them and the decisions on the future have to be made by them and not by me, I supported it. But it has disappeared. The land on which the Palestinian state was supposed to be built is now paved with 800,000 illegal Israeli settlers. How are you going to get them out of the territory that was supposed to be the Palestinian state? Gaza, which was supposed to be part of the Palestinian state, is now entirely in ruins. So I'm suspicious of people that keep mentioning two-state solutions, because what if Israel refuses to give a two-state solution? We're left fighting for something which isn't going to happen anyway. And then there's the issue of the millions of Palestinian refugees scattered around the area and around the world. They have no right to return under this two-state solution. I've got a better solution. from the river to the sea, let's have every person, Muslim, Christian, Jew, an equal citizen one of the other. Let's call it Israel-Palestine, or Palestine-Israel. Or I've got a better idea. Let's call it the Holy Land, in which everyone who has been driven out of there has the right to return, and everyone lives as equal citizens under the law.
Thank you. We're going to take a final question from the floor on this. Thank you.
If you've been following politics over the last 4 or 5 years, particularly now with Gaza, the thread that goes through all of it is political corruption. In some societies, it's more clear to see. In Pakistan, we just had the recent elections, a more corrupt regime you couldn't even write a book about. And the lowest parties are working on a coalition to drag out your favourite and our favourite, Imran Khan, who got the majority of the votes. We've seen this so many times. We've seen it in the US, not for the first time with Trump. It happened with Bush with the pregnant judge and the non-pregnant judge in Florida. So when a state such as the United States can get away with manipulating the results of the general election, everybody else is going to follow. How would you deal with global corruption on that scale? How would you prevent that happening? And if you do get into Parliament, either of you, okay, I actually can't vote for you, okay, because I'm in a different constituency. But my request to you would be, would you take a motion that takes away the corruption by lobbyists, whether they're country-based, industrial-based, commercial-based, or political-based, that have no right in the UK, that have no right to be voting or asking people like Lindsay Hoyle, right, a paid Zionist, you can see it. When Zelensky came over, he gave him a helmet, and I'll leave that to your imagination, right? A signed helmet from one of their pilots that he was grinning ear to ear for.
Thank
and
you.
then when he went to
Thank you.
my question is, how would you stop people like that?
Thank you.
The charade.
How will you stop the lobbyists and corruption? Iain first. And we've literally got 30 seconds each to get on this one.
As I said near the beginning of all of this, we need a change to our parliamentary system, we need a change to the way we are represented. We also need to make sure that there are powers in place to investigate corruption. And it's as simple as that. Whether I would be able to achieve that, I don't know, but one commitment I will give you is this. Anything that is paid into any campaign that I'm involved with will be thoroughly checked, and it will not be done with any link or any commitment that is based on that income. And it won't be much because the Liberal Democrats don't get much.
Yes, I think that politicians should be forced to wear on their clothing the names of their sponsors, so that we know when they stand up that they're sponsored by this company or that country. Like NASCAR racing, where, you know, racing cars, where they all have their sponsors on their clothes. That's what we should have in politics. Isn't it odd that both the Speaker and the Deputy Speaker last night, who presided over this shambles, were both members of the Labour Friends of Israel? I call them the Labour Fiends of Israel. It's just a misprint. I just dropped the R. The Labour Fiends of Israel. How does it happen? By chance that both the Speaker and the Deputy Speaker in charge of that chaos were both members of the Labour Friends of Israel? Why does Israel have so many friends in the Labour Party? Why? They're not friends of Zimbabwe or friends of Turkmenistan. They're all friends of Israel. Why? What is it that they find so particularly attractive about an apartheid state that's on trial for genocide. Not one of them has resigned. Not one member of the Labour Friends of Israel has resigned over the last 138 days. I want, Paul Daniels, I can't remember her name now. She died, poor girl, but Debbie, ask Mrs. Paul Daniels. Thank you.
You're welcome.
What first attracted you to the multi-millionaire Paul Daniels? It was one of the most devastating questions ever asked on television. And I would like to ask these Labour fiends of Israel, what first attracted you to this state 2,500 miles away of 6 million people? And you're endlessly going there. They're donating large amounts of money into your election campaigns, into your political party. Keir Starmer has had hundreds of thousands of pounds from the fiends of Israel. And unless you know, you don't know. I know, and you know now, because I just told you. Many of you already knew, but the mass of the public don't know. They think that Keir Starmer is saying what he's saying because he believes it, but I know that that isn't true. Because I stood in a room listening to a speech by the same Keir Starmer in 2015, ancient history I know, 9 years ago. I was there, saw his lips move as he made a speech calling for Israel to be kicked out of the Football Association, FIFA, because they were a racist apartheid state. Imagine, in 9 years, he's gone from wanting to kick Israel out of football to being Israel's biggest supporter anywhere in the world. I wonder what happened on that road to Damascus.
That's the longest time it's taken to do a U-turn on anything in the last few years.
Good line. Thank you. We'll have to leave it there for the questions. This has been thoroughly interesting. I'm going to, apart from Reverend Mark Coleman, do we have any other independent candidates in the audience? This is your opportunity to speak now. Okay. Reverend Mark Coleman has 2 minutes to make his pitch. Can we get this one? Thank you. It'll be 2 minutes of your time. Thank you.
You've had you've heard lots of words. Just listen to me for a bit for democracy, because there's a few candidates missing. So do listen. I don't mean you have to listen, but I'd be honoured if you listen. Awad Ishaq died in 2020. At that time, I lived maybe 400 or 500 yards away on Clement Royd Street. That little boy died because of the mould in a damp house, and around that time I've been aware for some years about cold and damp housing, and Rochdale has a lot of it, a lot of cold and damp housing. And when I worked for the charity Age Concern, I saw how that affected older people. Cold housing kills people, and I learned in 2021 that about 8,500 people died in cold homes. And then there's another tens of thousands of early winter deaths. That's the jargon, early winter deaths. That prompted me to go and sit on the motorways around London. And I took that rather drastic decision because I thought this is so serious, and we have a political system that is so broken that there is no response to these horrible statistics. And year after year, every party, all the parties, one of them's represented here tonight, they produced reports, they said they would insulate housing, but it never happened. And, of course, insulating housing is a very good way to reduce carbon emissions, which brings me on to the next point. Our politicians are lying to us. We are facing the collapse of civilization in decades to come, not many years away. They're not telling us these things, they're not telling us about the temperatures, they lie to us about the oil, and you've heard one or two of those tonight. And you've heard how Rishi Sunak has signed off all new permissions to the oil and gas companies to go ahead and dig up new oil and gas, which will push us further to disaster. So they are not actually protecting us, the government.
Thank you.
They're planning to kill us. I'm sorry. Well, the one 30 seconds became 2 or 3 minutes. We were timing, so I'm claiming another minute here. I'm sorry, I'm going to.
Go on, Reverend.
Thank you very much.
Good old-time religion.
So the politics is broken, and it's failing us. We need to protect the people of Rochdale. And I don't mean in a patronising way. They need to be told the truth, and then we need to claim the people's power for better ways of working. We've heard criticism of the council tonight, and maybe rightly so. I would propose a Rochdale People's Assembly, where people come together, chosen by sortition, like a jury, chosen at random, so it's not just the big noises who dominate the show, but ordinary people who can get their head into some issues and then give a fairly strong steer to their representatives, councillors or MPs. We need to give power back to the people so trust can be reborn. I'll work on what my last
20 seconds.
I'll stop there. Obviously, the genocide must stop, and others have spoken more eloquent than me about the horror. The insanity of killing so many people. Just the other week, I was walking through the Kingsway Business Park. I live near there on Turf Hill. I'm a local resident. And I noticed a factory that I was pretty sure was connected to the arms industry. And it is. So we have an arms company, Thales, who French, they also do other things. I'm just winding up now. We need to call them out where it happens and resist all those who are trying to kill people. That means the children in Gaza, that means the people in this country whose lives seem to be expendable too. So let's stand together for life.
Very much. Out at 9 o'clock, so I will have to keep the candidates on stage to 2 minutes. George, 2 minutes exactly.
I want you to take two. I want to thank you and to thank Mr. Donaldson and to thank the audience, both present and online, for what has been, I was going to say the best hustings. It's actually been the only hustings. It's the only election I've ever been in which there was only one hustings, and we must all express our gratitude to you for organising it. And to some of the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune for those who were disappointed at not being here. While I'm on Shakespeare, we as a country are so steeped in blood that it is difficult to decide whether to go on or to go back, but we must go back. We're involved in wars around the world which are immoral, which will have no good effect or result, and which we can't even afford to prosecute. Our ships don't sail, our nuclear weapons misfire. As anyone who's seen the spectacular video of what happened at the test firing of a nuclear missile from a British submarine just this week now already knows. The Defence Secretary, Mr. Shaps, at least that's what he's called today, he used to be called Mr. Green, he used to be called Patricia Green. So he's been Mr. Green and Mrs. Green, and now he's Mr. Shaps. He carefully explained that there's nothing wrong with our nuclear weapons. It was just that they were affected by dampness. Now, given that they are submarine-launched nuclear weapons, if they don't fire when it's damp, we better hope that Putin never finds out about it. Thank you very much.
We've got a closing statement from Iain. I've got a couple of announcements after that, and then we're free to leave.
Well, I'm very disappointed in George stealing my best line for the night.
Get used to it.
Hopefully not. Well, we need representation that represents us here in Rochdale. And, you know, like George, I've never been to university, although I have worked in a university and I've worked with the people who are there, and I know how important it is that we have a decent education and a university education available for people. I come from an ordinary working class family. My dad was a fitter in engineering. My mum worked in kitchens when she first started working again after raising me and my sister up to school age. They never had two of us to live together, but they managed to make sure that we had a decent life and we were brought up well. I am so saddened that we're in a situation in this day and age where we are still seeing the same situation time and time again. The parents working and scraping and saving in order to do the best for their kids. And we have people who are taking far too much money out of the system, who are receiving far too much at the top, whilst those people at the bottom are suffering. I want to change that. I hope you'll give me the chance to help to change that. It won't come from an individual, it will come from a movement, and it will come from having people who are able, as a political movement, to make change. Mistakes have been made in the past, but I hope you'll give me a chance to put them right in the future.
Thank you. And thank you to our candidates, George Galloway and Iain Donaldson, for taking part this evening. It has been passionate, but it's been good-spirited and a great debate between the two of you. Thank you to all of you who came along today and participated, asked your questions and joined in with the audience. I'm really grateful for your time and your contributions. I want to let you know that there are 11 candidates in this by-election. We've heard from some of them today, but just to read their names out of fairness. Azhar Ali, Independent, formerly Labour, suspended from the party, but he will still appear on the ballot as Labour. Paul Ellison from the Conservative Party, Iain Donaldson, Liberal Democrats, Simon Danchuk from Reform UK, George Galloway from the Workers' Party of Britain, Reverend Mark Coleman, Independent, Michael Howarth, Independent, David Anthony Tully, Independent, William Howarth, Independent, Guy Watton from the Green Party has also been suspended. He's no longer campaigning, but he also will appear on the ballot. Raven Roden Subordinate of the official Monster Raving Looney Party. So they are your 11 candidates. Thank you everybody for your